Bonjour et bienvenue à notre rendez-vous quotidien pour la presse en ligne et en direct sur EBS. Nous sommes aujourd'hui le lundi 11 janvier. Nous avons quelques annonces à vous faire avant de passer à vos questions et nous allons commencer avec Sonia avec une annonce sur notre soutien aux PME. Sonia.
Good afternoon. As of today, small and medium-sized enterprises can apply for European funds to protect and make better use of intellectual property rights. The Commission and the European Union Intellectual Property Office created the so-called Ideas Powered for Business SME Fund to help firms develop intellectual property strategies and protect their IP rights both at national and EU level. 20 million euros are available for the first year. The new grant scheme offers financial support in the form of reimbursements for trademark and design registration and IP scan services, including intellectual property pre-diagnostic. You'll find more information on the scheme and a link to the application form in our daily news. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sonia, we now move over to Balázs, who is here, will come on the podium, who has good news on our efforts to increase rescue stockpiles across the Union. Balázs.
Indeed, good afternoon. So the expansion of the rescue medical stockpile continues with the involvement of 4 member states. As of today, Belgium, the Netherlands and Slovenia will become the new host countries for rescue medical supplies. In addition, a second medical reserve will be established by Germany, which is already a rescue host country. Now in total, we have 9 countries hosting the common European stockpile. Supplies have grown significantly in the meantime and now include more than 65 million medical masks and 15 million FFP2 and FFP3 masks, more than 280 million pairs of medical gloves, close to 20 million medical gowns and aprons, and we also have now several thousand oxygen concentrators and ventilators.
Thank you very much, Balázs. And finally, we have Vivian for a last announcement on our work to preserve biodiversity. Vivian. Vivian seems to have a connection problem, so I will make the announcement myself. Is she there? Vivian, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Eric. La Commission lance aujourd'hui une consultation publique sur les objectifs européens de restauration de la nature. Ceci est un élément clé de la stratégie de l'Union européenne en faveur de la biodiversité pour 2030, lancée en mois de mai l'année dernière dans le cadre du Pacte vert européen. La consultation est ouverte jusqu'à 5 avril et les commentaires seront pris en compte dans la proposition de la Commission concernant des objectifs européens juridiquement contraignants de restauration de la nature d'ici fin 2021. Cette consultation est lancée aujourd'hui, le jour du sommet One Planet, qui cette année met l'accent sur la biodiversité. La présidente von der Leyen y prononcera également un discours cet après-midi que je vous invite à suivre sur EBS. Plus d'informations sont disponibles sur nos Daily News. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Viviane. Ceci nous amène à la fin de nos annonces et nous allons donc commencer avec vos questions. Je passe la parole à Athanasios.
Thank you very much, Eric. Bonjour. You don't see me?
Yes, we do. Go ahead.
No, you do. Okay, very good. So, the President of the Republic of Cyprus mentioned in an interview that he gave in a newspaper in Cyprus this weekend that he intends to negotiate and get some kind of COVID-19 vaccine, I don't know which type, from Israel, and not from the EU and not from the existing agreement that there is. First of all, can he do that? Is it even possible to negotiate with a third country and get any type of vaccine from that third country, in addition to what the EU is providing. And he also mentioned some very specific accusations for delays. He accused the EU for delays, specifically in regard to the deployment of vaccines in Cyprus. Are you aware of any Cyprus-specific delays of that kind? So those are my two questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I pass the floor to Stefan.
Good morning, Anastasios. Thank you very much for this question. First, of course, we will not give any comments on comments or step into speculation. As far as this issue is concerned, I think, and as far as the nature of such announcements are concerned, I think it's best to check with the Cypriot authorities what they have in mind here. I think what is very important for us is that the negotiations and the conclusion of contracts take place within the political and legal framework of our vaccine strategy, as has been stressed last week by the President. And we also had the opportunity to discuss this a little bit more in detail in last week's midday press briefing. So for us, this is the framework which applies to the negotiation and conclusion of contracts with our portfolio of vaccine developers. On the Cypriot specificities regarding the fastness or not fastness of the rollout of vaccines, of course, we do not have any comments. You know that the European Commission has already issued in mid-October a recommendation to help member states with the preparation of these vaccine campaigns. Member states are working on this. We are offering support where member states believe that such support may be useful. But this is, of course, as Eric has also stressed a few times already last week, an enormous challenge, and we all have to set our minds to it and make sure that we can have this rollout of vaccines as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Athanasios, I see you have a follow-up.
Yeah. Should we presume from what we have just heard that they did not contact you for this Israel vaccine deal? Thanks.
But Athanasios, why should we be aware necessarily of such contacts? Remember that the European Union is responsible for negotiating with the pharmaceutical companies that were identified as having interesting candidates for a vaccine. We have not taken over the whole of the vaccination efforts of member states. I'm not aware of these contacts between, or potential contacts between Cyprus and Israel, but if there are discussions between Cyprus and Israel on, I don't know which vaccine, by the way, this is not necessarily something which is immediately of relevance to us. What is of relevance to us, obviously, as we have said time and time again here in the press room, is the fact that for a vaccine to be deployed in the European Union, it needs to have been, it needs to have followed the authorization processes that we have. So a positive assessment by EMA and a market authorization by the European Union, if it is one of the vaccines developed by one of the providers that we are negotiating with. Are there other questions for us on vaccines today? Please only keep your hand raised if your question concerns vaccines. And I see that Sandor has a question. Sandor, go ahead.
Tomorrow there will be a hearing at the European Parliament with the Commission about the vaccination strategy, and it's pretty sure that MEPs will want to have bigger transparency in terms of they will want to know the timeline of the rollout of the vaccines, and also maybe they will demand more details on the liability issues in the contract. So my question is, why are these two issues secret, and is there any willingness from the Commission side to, be more transparent?
Thank you, Sandor. Let's be clear. The Commission has always said that it wants to be as transparent as possible in the framework that is the one under which we have been negotiating the contracts with the vaccine developers, with the pharmaceutical companies. And we are working on this, and of course hope to make progress on this. And if there are developments in this regard, we will make announcements as soon as possible. Jack, question on vaccines. Oh, sorry, it's not on vaccines, I understand, sorry. Please only keep your hand raised if it is on vaccines. Thank you. Martin.
Thank you. Yeah, going back to the issue of getting vaccines from third countries, since other EU member states might get the same idea, could you just clarify, can they actually buy vaccines from third countries without breaking this principle of solidarity, which is also legally binding, as you informed us last week? Thank you.
Look, this is a completely hypothetical question. Honestly, what we have said, we have a framework in place, as Stefan has explained time and time again, which concerns our negotiations with the pharmaceutical companies for advanced purchasing agreements. This is what our process refers to. Now, we would really need to have more details on what type of third country contacts are mentioned here in order to be able to comment. And since we don't have these details, as far as I'm aware, it's very difficult for us to comment here on the podium. What I can say, since this issue continues to come, is that the President has asked Commissioner Kyriakides to send a letter to all health ministers asking them to provide us with all the necessary transparency on the way in which they are complying with the provisions of our vaccine strategy in terms of contacts, or lack of contacts rather, with those pharmaceutical companies that we have been or are negotiating with. So this letter is currently being drafted and will be sent as soon as it is ready. Do we have other questions on vaccines today? I see one hand raised. Jérôme.
Yes, thank you very much, Eric. Just on the issue of vaccines, you know, in some countries, I mean, for example, in Ireland, it was reported that up to 40,000 vaccines were sitting in Dublin for more than 2 weeks. And, you know, when this issue has been highlighted on some of the flagship news programs, the current affairs programs, there seems to be sort of very little scrutiny in terms of what has been happening at EU level. For example, I understand that the European Commission published its vaccine strategy in June, and then on the 15th of October, it published a rollout strategy. And, you know, but from what I'm hearing is this issue is not being raised to government ministers. And so my question is about communication. Is there a communication deficit from the European Commission point of view? You obviously have yourself and Stefan and Commissioner Kyriakides and President von der Leyen, excellent communicators in various languages, but I've never heard any of you on, just as one example, being interviewed one-on-one situation on the media in Ireland, which I could imagine would be very effective in terms of getting the EU's message across. And I don't say this as a criticism per se. I mean, it's been suggested that Brexit might not have happened if the EU was better able to communicate its achievements. But actually, this is a bigger issue because this is an issue of life and death. And so if government ministers and civil servants are being let off the hook because they're not being asked the right questions, or the European Commission isn't conveying its policies clearly enough, people are not getting the jabs. And therefore, it is a matter of life and death. So is there, I mean, I've been listening to, I only got back, I was listening to all the debates here on vaccines over the last couple of weeks that went on for ages, and very good questions, very good answers. But it seems to me, it strikes me a little bit like an echo chamber, because I didn't hear any of this on the media in Ireland, just Ireland as an example. But from speaking to colleagues, I hear the same is happening in other countries. So is there a communications deficit? Is there a problem really about the strategy in terms of communication?
Jérôme, we have been communicating through all channels possible when it comes to the procurement policy that we have put in place in order to purchase vaccines, and on the importance for member states to define and roll out effective vaccination strategies. And it must be, however, very clear that the vaccination strategies are the responsibility of member states, who have the opportunity of exchanging best practices, exchanging information among themselves in the Health Security Committee, as Stefan has highlighted here a certain number of times. We have ourselves made sure that we could provide advice whenever asked on what we see as the priorities when it comes to vaccination groups. But the fact is, vaccination strategies are rolled out by member states. And on the point, the specific point that you were making related to vaccines and their being used or not being used, let me remind you that we have signed the advanced purchasing agreements, but then the member states sign the specific purchase orders, purchase forms that allow them, therefore, to calibrate within the framework of these advanced purchasing agreements the deliveries of vaccines according to their needs, basically according to their vaccination strategies. So this means that we are trying to ensure that each of the responsible players is playing the role that corresponds to their responsibilities. Jérôme, you still have your hand raised. Do you have a follow-up?
Thanks. Just one quick follow-up then. Let me, without the sort of ranty element of it, let me be more specific about the question. I hope I have my dates right, but the vaccine rollout strategy was unveiled by the European Commission on the 15th of October, I think. I'm pretty sure it was the 15th of October. It was mid-October anyway. So my question is, if each of the 27 member states had taken that vaccine strategy rollout and implemented as it was written down on the paper, regardless of whether they have the vaccines or not, obviously wants to get the vaccines, but in terms of if they had have implemented this vaccine rollout, is it the European Commission's view that there wouldn't be any problems in terms of the distribution of the vaccine in member states?
Joe, I'm going to pass the floor to Stefan on details, but I think that the Commission has not issued a detailed, specific document specifying to each member state in great detail what it is that, how exactly they should be rolling out their vaccination strategy. For a very simple reason, member states are extremely different in size, in population number, in institutional framework when it comes to the organization of the health services, et cetera, et cetera. And therefore, what we have done, as the President reminded us here on last Friday, is we have explained a certain number of principles and key priorities, in particular when it comes to the priority groups that should be getting the vaccine. But then, of course, it is up to each member state to organize the vaccination process. But I pass the floor now to Stefan, more specifically on the documents that we have issued and what they say and do not say.
Thank you very much, Eric. No, you're absolutely right. Again, as you said in the beginning, Eric, the vaccination policies are a national competence. Now, of course, it was very important for the Commission to make sure that these vaccinations happen in a coordinated way that's in the interest of the member states, in the interest of the European Union as a whole, which is why on the 15th of October, you're right, Jerome, the recommendation date from the 15th of October, we adopted this recommendation where we invite the member states to reflect on a series of very important elements, something they need to do to prepare their vaccination campaigns. We invite member states, for instance, to reflect on the identification of the priority groups, who should be vaccinated first. And we suggest a list of groups that we believe should be considered to reflect on this prioritization exercise. We invite the members to reflect on making sure that the necessary infrastructure is in place, that the necessary equipment is in place, taking into account the technical specificities of the vaccines. As you know, each vaccine comes with its own specificities and its own logistical challenges. We invite member states to reflect on the necessary staffing, making sure that you have enough staffing, skilled staffing. We invite member states to also reflect on organizing the necessary communication so that the European citizens are well informed about the vaccination campaign. And so these recommendations have all been made to help the member states to actually prepare these vaccination campaigns. But then indeed, it's up to the member states to take this exercise forward and to translate this into actual plans and implemented vaccinations. Thank you.
And Stefan is too modest to say this, but if I remember well, he was actually on Irish television last week, specifically on our vaccine strategy. So we have been present somewhat, at least, on Irish media. Right, I see no further questions on vaccines per se, but I know that Louise had a question on coronavirus-related issue on the Danish travel rules. So let us continue with Louise. Louise, you have the floor.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the new Danish travel rules that were announced on Friday afternoon. The Danish government is now advising against all travel abroad, even for business travelers. And it's also restricting travel into the country so that both EU citizens and even Danish citizens can now be turned away if they fail to show a negative test that is less than 24 hours old. So first I wanted to ask, have you been notified about these rules in advance, and what is your reaction? Thank you.
Thank you. I think this sits somewhere between Christian and Adalbert, but let's go to Christian first.
Yes, hello, good afternoon, and thank you for your question. I will stay more general on this one, and not comment in detail on individual measures taken by individual member states. But let me remind that the Commission has been pushing for increased and better coordination at EU level for various initiatives and guidelines over the past months. We are, of course, in regular contact with all member states, and we are closely monitoring the situation. Physical distancing and self-discipline continues to be necessary in the current circumstances, and, of course, until the vaccination is more widely available. As you know, the ECDC recommends that people should be encouraged to reduce activities associated with increased transmission, such as travel and social activities. At the same time, citizens understandably expect member states to further step up coordination efforts regarding free movement and to ensure, of course, timely information on new health and travel measures. You can, on individual measures, of course, I would invite you to check also our Reopen EU platforms, which contains the latest information on coronavirus measures received by us from the member states. So we make them available directly there. Let me mention maybe two recommendations that we have put out still. The one, of course, from 13th of October, where member states have committed to ensure more coordination and better information. On this one, we need to see more progress on implementing these commitments, and we call on member states to further work on this and step up their efforts. And I would like to remind also on the Commission recommendation that we put out in the context of the UK variant of the virus just ahead of Christmas, which also contains recommendations specifically for this new situation. And basically, we put out a press release back then, but basically it was recommending to limit all non-essential travel as much as possible, but at the same time keep possible essential travel and, of course, free movement of essential workers, transport workers, etc. Thank you.
On whether the Danish authorities have notified these measures or not, I pass the floor to Adalbert.
Yes, perhaps just to add that indeed we are aware of the fact that internal border controls are in force in Denmark, that we have a notification from the Danish authorities in place for controls at internal borders from the 12th of November 2020 all the way up to the 11th of May 2021.
Thank you. Louise, you have a follow-up.
Yes, thanks so much. I don't want to thank you for the answers. I just wanted to ask Christian, so do you think this is a good example of coordination efforts and that Denmark is following sort of the rules and the spirit of those quotes you mentioned? And also, do you worry that other countries might follow, that this could set off a new spiral of restrictions and closures? Thank you.
Christian.
Well, as I said at the very beginning, I'm going to not comment in detail or make a value judgment of individual measures. You can find these measures, as far as I'm aware, already on our Reopen EU platform. And what I would like to repeat in general is that it is very important for member states to coordinate and to inform in time and in advance of any new measures and any changes in the measures that they're taking.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions for us on the health, on the pandemic situation in Europe? Please only keep your hand raised if it is the case. Thomas, is there a question on this?
Yes, it is.
Go ahead.
And I hope you can hear me. Yes. I was wondering, and I've also asked this question by email, I was wondering which commissioners have been in quarantine the last couple of weeks since the Christmas break, and a lot of them have been in their home countries.
Thank you very much for that question. What is clear is that, as you know, all commissioners are required to comply with the rules that are in place in Belgium, obviously without prejudice to their privileges under the Privileges and Immunities Agreement that we have with Belgium, but they are supposed to respect the rules that are in place in Belgium, which means that fundamentally they can come to work for essential meetings, but in their private lives they have to comply with these rules. Now, we do not keep a roster of exactly which commissioner is where at which point in time, when they have come back, etc. Since this is private information, it is up to each commissioner to ensure that they respect the rules. You have a follow-up.
Of course, private information, but some of these commissioners are willingly enough to share this private information on social media websites. And there we can see that, for example, Commissioner Kyriakides has been in Cyprus for several days, I think more than a week. She's not the only one, so it's unfair to just mention her. The same is true, I think, for Commissioner Soika, for Commissioner Lenarčič. So I'm still wondering, have these people been, when they came back to Belgium, have they been in quarantine? And did they do a test on the 1st and the 7th day?
Well, as I I can only repeat what I've just said, which is that it is their responsibility to ensure that they comply with the Belgian rules. All right, let us now move on to other issues, and therefore I go back to Jack. You had a question on the suspension of President Trump, I understand, from social media. Is that correct?
Yeah. Hi, Eric. I have two questions, actually. I want to ask about the president's call with President Erdogan over the weekend as well. But I know that there are other questions on this. So my thing, we all read the Thierry Breton, the Commissioner Breton thing about suspending the social media accounts. And in that op-ed in Politico, he mentioned sort of coordination with US regulators, etc., to deal with this. I wonder if you can clarify whether the Commission, as part of this, is saying that that they should be considered to be publishers like us, and also what kind of coordination would work with US regulators in dealing with social media platforms and how they operate under the DSA.
Thank you. Question for Johannes.
Thank you, Eric. Hi, Jack. Let me first say that we have, of course, seen the reports on the decision of social media platforms to suspend the accounts of the President of the United States. This is primarily the responsibility of the platforms enforcing their own terms of services. Now, on your question on the op-ed, I mean, it's out there, so I would not like to comment on what the Commissioner says in his op-ed. I think we have put forward, as you know, in the middle of December, 15th of December, the DSA and the DMA proposal. And of course, this is for the European Union. On the other hand, the aim is, of course, that these rules, once adopted, may also inspire governance at a more global level. At this stage, I cannot now preempt what would be the outcome of these discussions and how then a more global coordination could work. I mean, this is, let's say, 2 steps ahead. But I think this is what the Commissioner wanted to hint at, that the rules that we would like to introduce for the European Union, which balance basically the respect for, on the one hand, accountability of, the respect for the fundamental rights and the freedom of speech, with the more accountability of the platforms, that this may also inspire cooperation at global level.
Jack, you have a follow-up question on this?
Yeah, so I suppose my question is what the Commissioner wrote in that political op-ed, is that the European Commission's position on the suspension of accounts on social media now? Can we take that to be now the Commission's position?
Jack, as you know very well, the Commission's position is determined by the decisions of the College. But obviously, commissioners in the run-up to decisions have the possibility of expressing what they think should be a good policy line. And I think this is exactly what the Commissioner has done. So this is feeding into a debate. I know that there was another question on the same issue from Mauro. Oh, Angela, sorry. Angela, apologies. Angela, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, apologies,
yes.
sorry.
Thank you, don't worry. I'm used to it, also in Italy. Yes, on the same topic, I was wondering, reading what Breton said to Politico, how do you fit the Digital Services Act, which says that what is illegal offline should be also illegal online, with the criticism exercised by Breton on the decision by Twitter to suspend Trump's account. I mean, Trump made maybe an illegal act to call for the protest at Capitol Hill and everything, we all know. And Twitter decided, okay, you can't say that because that is illegal, you can't say that on Twitter. So how do you reconcile the DSA with the criticism of the Twitter's decision? Thank you.
Johannes.
Merci. Yeah, thank you, Angela. I think let me say, so if you look at the op-ed, the phrase you kind of now used to illustrate, and it was widely reported, is certainly, I wouldn't say put out of context, but within a wider context. In this context, he says it is, we have to put a question mark behind the fact that the CEO can basically take a decision to take down an account. But the more fundamental question, and this is what is in his op-ed written, the more fundamental question is, why did it come so far? And why did platforms not act before against incitement for hate, against disinformation, against hate speech online? And this is the point he's making. So why do we come to this point? And this is exactly where the DSA would like to give an answer for the European Union, that he would like to reconcile the respect for the fundamental rights, and I'm happy to explain to you how we would like to do that, together with more accountability of the platforms who have to inform, or under the DSA proposal, would need to inform about the way they moderate content, would need to set out in clear terms what are the rules, would need to inform about a decision, for example, to suspend an account, but then the user could also seek redress. So there's these clear steps foreseen under the DSA proposal. So I think it's actually not a contradiction, but an illustration of the need to have more regulation, and at least our answer for the EU is the DSA in that respect.
Thank you very much, Johannes. Are there other questions on this issue? Please only keep your hand raised if you have a question on this. Lukasz.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So on the way of this decision of Facebook, Twitter concerning an account of President Trump, the popularity of other alternative social network platform is growing. And of course, European Commission has an account on Twitter, Facebook. Commissioners have an account on it. So do you consider, or did you consider, as a way of diversification and maybe some way of a promotion of the diversification, to open channels of communication on another new social networks, and not to be just dependent only on US giants, tech corporations? Thank you.
Well, it's a question about corporate communication policy of the Commission, so it's not digital policy per se, and of course it depends also a little bit on the different college members, for example, if we hint at that. But there's, of course, a corporate communication as well of the Commission. We're not present only on Twitter, we're not present only on Facebook, on the networks that you mentioned. We have like a quite diversified strategy, but of course I cannot now make any assumptions about what the future policy may bring. Of course, the idea is to reach out to a variety of stakeholders and citizens to inform about EU policies, and so the idea is to go where they are. But that's all I can say, I think.
David, you have the floor.
Thank you, Eric. David Price, Your Democracy. Yes, it's a much larger issue than President Trump being cut off from Twitter. I mean, it's quite extraordinary that a president in office should be cut off from communication. But there are, and it's not just Twitter, it's a whole lot of social media. And then it's not just a whole lot of social media, it's a whole lot of communicators who've been cut off simultaneously. So, and they're not all in violation of the so-called community rules. Some of them are presenting information which is not inciting violence or anything like that, but presenting information which is contrary to some of the some political parties in America and so on. And other issues, quite a lot of other issues. Parler, for example, has been cut off because it's being hosted on Amazon computers. So there's a question of cartel action here, as well as the communication problems. So there's a cartel action against communication, which is basically what I would like to say. And if
David,
a large
what
section,
your question is? Sorry,
I'm just putting it together. But those are the elements. The question is, are you analyzing the cartel action of this, not in a normal economic cartel, but a communications cartel?
I don't think we can answer that question here on the podium based on very, very recent developments. As you know, the Commission is very much in favor of media pluralism in general. We've had the opportunity of depicting here in the press room many times the actions that we undertake in this respect, but we will not comment further on this dimension. Petra, a question also on this? We cannot hear you, Petra. Your mic source must be wrong. Sorry, so we will, whilst you try to solve your mic issue, we will move on. And I now open the floor to other issues and go to Igor. Igor, you have the floor.
Yeah, hi, Eric. Do you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Perfect. I'm the colleague of Petra's, and we have, I guess, quite similar questions. And this is regarding the financing of Slovenian press agency. The government, actually the government communication office last week announced that the financing of the STA is a direct law obligation. And on the other hand, that means that this opens the question whether this is a kind of a state aid or not. And the other question would be also, is this the question of competition? That's what the government communication office wrote. So my question would be, has the Commission got any requests so far from the government communication office of Slovenia regarding the question of so-called state aid or not? The second question would be, what would be your answer if you got this question? And maybe the last question, do you think that this might be a kind of limiting of press freedom?
Thank you. I pass the floor to Ariana on the state aid question.
Hi, Igor. Hi, Petra, and hi, Eric. I hope you can hear me and see me. I will leave the third question to Christian, of course. On the first two questions, what I can tell you right now is that the Commission is in contact with the Slovenian authorities on this matter. I can also add that in general, state aid rules enable member states to grant aid to press agencies as compensation for services of general economic interest, and that if certain conditions are met, including that the amount of aid is below a certain threshold, compensation can be granted without prior notification and approval by the Commission, so they can be implemented directly.
Thank you. Christian, do you have anything to add on the third question?
Yes, I'm happy to add a few words. I mean, the Commission is, of course, aware of the decision to discontinue the funding for the Slovenian Press Agency. I think we've already said that when the decision was taken in December, media should be able to work freely and independently everywhere in the European Union. This lies at the heart of media pluralism. Public media play a special role in the European Union, and we call on all member states to refrain from attempts on putting pressure on them. We attach great importance to those fundamental values as expressed in the European Democracy Action Plan and Media Audiovisual Action Plan, where media freedom and pluralism are, of course, core elements. The decision related to funding of the agency needs to be scrutinized at national level by relevant authorities, of course, and we will continue to monitor the situation closely.
Thank you, Christian. Petra, do you have another angle on this story than Igor's? Oh, no, sorry, your mic source is still not working. We'll give the floor back to Igor for a follow-up.
My first question, did you get any new requests from the Slovenian government in the last days regarding this so-called state aid?
I think that Ariana has told you what she could tell you when she was saying that we were in contact. I don't think that she will go into further detail on this. Petra, in view of your issues, I suggest that you get in touch bilaterally on this so that we can move on. So I now go back to Jack, who had a question, I believe, on the VTC with President Erdogan. Jack.
Hi, Eric. Hi, Eric. Sorry. Firstly, I have a question on why the president and why the commission didn't release a sort of fuller statement than just a short tweet after what's kind of quite an important call, I'd assume. And also, I wonder if you can give us an update or sort of a clarification on what the commission's position is regarding Turkey, specifically this idea of visa liberalization, this sort of openness, what the commission and what the member states, I suppose, it is a member states question, but I wonder if you can just outline the Commission's position on where the relationship lies between Turkey and the European Union at the moment. Just remind us of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Jack. On your first question, we very often release tweets after conversations between the president and heads of state or government, so there was absolutely no difference here. In the way we have communicated after this VTC and many of the VTCs that the president has had with other heads of state or government. On your second question, I pass the floor to Peter.
Thank you and good afternoon to everyone. Well, I mean, I would, Jack, refer you to the Council conclusions, the latest from December, and recall that the EU, all the EU member states have said that they are interested, that we are interested in having a constructive relationship with Turkey based on cooperation, and our work and efforts not only since the last conclusions in December, but actually the whole last year, are directed and focused on achieving this. And you can see the video conference call of by President von der Leyen and HRVP Borrell with President Erdogan as part of the outreach by the European Union to convey these messages, to discuss the need to de-escalate and to the need to do practical steps in order to move us on this road of constructive or renewal of constructive cooperation and dialogue, because this is what is needed. And in this sense, the EU position is not changed, it's captured in the EU Council conclusions. And also this is something what the Commission and the HRVP are working on in line with the tasking from the leaders from last December. So to prepare the overall overview of our relations, what do we want to achieve, what do we expect, and what do we have on offer. And this is continuing, and as I said, all these contacts and engagements are feeding into this process.
Thank you. Let us stick on the issue of relations with Turkey. Athanasios. Oh, sorry, Jack, I saw you had a follow-up perhaps, but we'll come back. Athanasios.
Yeah, it's a kind of follow-up on this. So have you been notified by Turkey or their diplomatic services of the intention of the Minister Çavuşoğlu to officially call Greece for exploratory talks next week? Do you have that information? Did they tell you, did Erdogan notify the president during the teleconference of that intention, or is it officially communicated to you in any other means? Thanks.
Peter, did we get official information on this?
Well, at this stage, as far as I am aware, I don't know anything about any official notification, but I would like to underline one thing, that the normalization or the discussions between Greece and Turkey and the engagement between these two countries is also a very important part of the overall relations between the EU and Turkey, because the irritants which were perceived by some of our member states are perceived by the whole EU as irritants, and they need to be removed. So in this sense, the renewal or the start of the talks is something the EU is expecting, and something that we expect would positively feed into the overall efforts to develop the positive track in our relations.
Thank you. Now let's move to Christian on this issue, sur ce sujet.
Oui, bonjour. En fait, je voudrais savoir si vous partagez le sentiment de la présidence turque qui dit que les tensions créées entre la Turquie et l'Union européenne sont dues à des caprices de certains États membres. Est-ce que le mot caprice vous semble approprié pour définir les tensions qui ont culminé ces derniers temps? Et ma seconde question, lors du dernier conseil, un mandat a été donné pour effectivement explorer et adopter des sanctions. Je voudrais savoir où est-ce qu'on en est. On m'a dit que ces sanctions devaient être adoptées à la mi-janvier. Nous sommes pratiquement à la mi-janvier. Est-ce que cela veut dire qu'effectivement, à votre connaissance, il y aurait une adoption de sanctions pour le prochain Conseil des ministres des Affaires étrangères? Et une troisième question, j'ai cru comprendre que le ministre des Affaires étrangères turc a été invité à Bruxelles. Est-ce que vous avez déjà une date de sa venue? Merci.
Sur ta première question, la réponse est très simple. Nous ne partageons certainement pas cette évaluation. Il y a des conclusions du Conseil européen qui montrent que c'est une position qui est partagée par l'ensemble de l'Union européenne. Je passe la parole à Peter sur les autres questions, même si je crois qu'on a déjà répondu à la troisième. Peter.
Donc, la deuxième question sur les sanctions, Christian, vous savez que nous jamais commentons sur le processus dans le Conseil. C'est un travail en cours, donc c'est fini quand l'adoption est faite à base d'un agrément de tous pays membres. Donc, c'est un processus en cours. La troisième question, oui, je peux confirmer la date pour la visite des ministres des Affaires étrangères turcs pour la semaine prochaine, le 21er janvier.
Nikolai, a question on this as well?
Yes. Nikolai Nielsen, EU Observer. President Erdogan also spoke about updating the EU-Turkey statement, and I was wondering if President von der Leyen supports this proposal as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will add nothing to the readout, the short readout that we gave of the conversation that took place on Saturday at this stage. This was a conversation which is taking place in a process that you know very well, that stems from the European Council of last December, and for the moment I will leave it at that. All right, I now open the floor to any other remaining issues you might have for us today. Are there other questions? That does not seem to be the case, so thank you very much. Bon appétit and see you tomorrow.